are there agreements there that you can create that when a new client comes on board, it's like, hey, these are the 10 agreements that we have for you to be working with us.
And it's a really, really powerful shift you can make when you move from expecting everything in your life to sitting down and creating agreements. Hello, listeners. Today we're going to be talking about agreements versus expectations.
Yeah, this will be golden. Like, we have been speaking a lot about this particular subject this week. It stemmed from a conversation in our WhatsApp chat, actually around like working on weekends. It like stemmed from like guys working on weekends and like boundaries around that. And we're like, do you know what? Like, we should really do some hard work on like agreements versus expectations. This session is going to be good. We're going to start with business. We're going to go into personal.
Yeah, I actually never, coming from like, we did the boundaries training, by the way. We did it on the Awaken Man. Like, my 20s starting a business, one of the biggest struggles I had was boundaries. It was something that really I struggled with my calendar, with keeping appointments, with all sorts of stuff. Did loads of work on that, better than ever been, still working on that. I got a sales coach, and he said to me really early on, it's like, if you want to look at the problem you've got in a relationship with a client, you need to go back to the first session. Like the first couple of sessions, because he said great clients aren't found, they're forged. And I love that as a statement. Like, you forge relationships with people by teaching them how to treat you. That was like a really, in an agreement is not just about what work is going to be done. It's how we're both going to show up for each other in this relationship. So I think this is going to cover not just your personal relationships with yourself. It's going to cover your business relationships, relationship with your spouse, with your friends. Working on agreements with people is going to change your life, because honestly, it just removes so much of the blurry bullshit that often causes arguments and problems.
Yeah, like you mentioned there about your early 20s, I was very much the same. I had no idea what the word meant. Like, boundaries, that wasn't in my vocab, not for a long time. It's only the last couple of years really that term has come in. So I suppose it's probably the same for many like entrepreneurs and guys that are starting businesses. And I know what it's like, because I did the same. We just start. Right? And you just get going, and you figure out a lot along the way. And if you can get some good mentors, like Ben's just said there, like a guy's taught him something really early on, it's invaluable, because it does change the game.
Yeah, and I think this is something I'm realizing from a relationship perspective, is that when there's lack of good communication, I'm not sure what the agreement is in the house. That's where problems come from. And like, if I'm expecting Poppy to do something and there's been no proper conversation, like, okay, is my job this, this, and this in the house, and you're never going to do it? As long as I'm clear on that, I'm not expecting you to do it and getting pissed off that you're not doing it. Can we just make an agreement on that? Let's verbally just say that. And then, because that has helped me so much. And I think even in my relationship in the house, that when I'm expecting something to be done and it's not done, that's where, obviously, when reality, I thought this should have been done, it's not done, there's stress. So what's helped me close that gap is starting to realize, okay, we need to create a clear bit of communication. What are the agreements here? And like, even yesterday, to actually talk about pertinent, my agreement with Poppy is that I'm present with the kids, and she could see that I wanted to get onto a meeting, and she could see that I wasn't present. So yeah, I got it in the neck, Pete.
Yeah, and to be fair to you, you actually said, because it was me that organised the meeting, and it was at 5 p.m. The guy we're having the meeting with is in the US, right? It was the earliest meeting we could get onto. And even for me, I'm like, because I don't really like working past that sort of time, so I could be with the family. But you did say, yeah, I might get it in the neck here, because this is actually going past what the agreement
I'll
is.
take it.
There's an interesting distinction here, and Ben, you'll probably remember the quote, because you're good at doing that. Got a freakishly good little skill there of just remembering things. But there's an interesting distinction between expectation and agreement. And I was thinking about this, like, an expectation is kind of like a form of assumption as well. And you know what happens when we assume? It goes wrong. It goes Pete Tong. Whereas an agreement is like, that's like a form of contract. Like, you've agreed something there.
Yeah, the quote's super long. It's a whole piece. Actually, credit where credit due. Steve Chandler wrote extensively about agreements. If you just type in on Google, Steve Chandler, agreements versus expectations, that was where I started to really work out, because Steve Chandler is one of the best coaches in the world. I've learned so much from his books, and a lot of what he talks about is being an owner in your life versus a victim. And the owner creates agreements, the victim has expectations. Because surefire thing is that when you expect something of someone and they don't do it, where it entrenches your belief that you're the victim of your circumstance, whereas an owner creates the circumstance. So really, really powerful shift. If you want to be an owner in your life, you have to create agreements with people. Who does what by when? That's, really, really tight. And how are we going to show up for each other? And we actually created some. It's actually been a great week on the Awaken Man. I was nervous yesterday going in and sharing about, we created a document, like how to make the most of the group for the new men that have joined. And there was like 15 guys on there who've been in the program for a year. But what we did is we recommitted them to this agreement. And it was really powerful. Pete was away because he had Leo that day. And what happened on the call was I watched guys like recommitting to why they were on the program, why they were doing what they're doing, and why we celebrate each other, why we push each other, why we challenge each other. And that was powerful. And I think this is something that may be worth saying, is that even if you've been in a relationship, you've got these, they're going to change and they're going to shift and they're going to adapt, and you need to recommit to certain agreements because the nature of human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into something that's like tangible and like real world examples. So when we talk about agreements, and I had this in my previous company, we didn't get the agreements right for a long time. This was both with my staff, like with my team members, and also like with our clients, and also with the consultants and the contractors that we use. Like our database of the amount of people that we touched was vast. What we did have in place with clients and with like team members was like contracts. And that's typically, you might know an agreement from like a contract, like you sign a contract when you join a new company, or you might give a contract out when a new client comes on board. And that's great, right? Contracts are good for both parties, but there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo in these contracts, and a lot of it is hard to understand for both parties. Like I remember a few years ago, we had these contracts that we were sending out to our clients, and I was like, guys, I understand half the words in here. I can't send it out to the clients. Like, how can we like culturify this? How can we make it into our like tone, our language, so like I can understand it and I know my clients are going to be able to understand it? And the same with like our team members. However, like what we learned later is that the contracts, like you read them once or you scan them, right? Because they're 5, 6, 7, 27 pages long, right? It doesn't really go in. Whereas what we're going to talk about here is like a set of agreements. And we started to form these a couple of years ago in my previous business, where it'd be like the commandments. Like this isn't like company values. This is like simple things. Like we expect you to turn up to meetings on time or 5 minutes before. Like there's like an agreement there.
You said it. You expect them. See.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, just going to call you there.
Yeah. You got to catch it. Absolutely. Yeah. Not delete that word, but that word, expect versus agree.
Yeah, we're agreeing to both turn up on time.
Yeah. So there's an agreement that you could absolutely implement like with your clients. So like if you say you've got a coaching business, for example, it's an easy one, and you're taking on a new coaching client, you run through a set of agreements, and it's like I agree to turning up to our meetings on time. Do you agree?
Because I've been 2 minutes late.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, must do better. He's got this like 2 minute banner. Okay, 2 minutes. I'm signing in, legit. It's the Zoom is logging in or being slow logging in is like, I got stuck in traffic. It's the new. This conversation. If we've got an agreement and I'm continually breaking that agreement, it gives Pete ground to say, hey, listen, right here, we made this agreement and you're breaking that. He can have a crucial confrontation. Now, we talked about crucial conversations in previous podcasts. There's 3 levels of conversations, right? There's just a conversation. Like, hey man, how you doing? X, Y, Z. I'm going to challenge you. That's a conversation. That's just a conversation. You can challenge in normal conversations. But when it becomes a crucial or hard conversation is when somebody hasn't met your expectations or agreements. It's when there's a disagreement. Yeah. What makes a crucial confrontation is when your standards haven't been met and they've been agreed, and you have to then confront the person about it. So it's like, hey, we agreed on this date that you'd be on time for meetings, Ben. You've been 2 minutes late 3 weeks in a row. Pete, cut me some slack. Got you, baby. No, jokes aside, that is an important one. And what happens is that if you keep breaking agreements, it's trust, isn't it? It's tiny bits of trust. Like I'm busting my neck to be at the laptop on time. If you're not on time, it's like, I'm not going to trust you to be there. That leaks. It metastasizes into other areas. And that's what these are for. It's to create really, really, really quality trust between 2 individuals. I'm going to be the best for you. You're going to be the best for me. We're going to be best for each other. Again, addressing all objects in the conversation. I found that as well, when I'm really clear about about things like part of our agreement with the Awaken Man is because we're an online business. We have put in there, you will find a calm, quiet space with good reception and good internet so you can take the call. Because this also removes the frustration from the call. So we have like 15, 20, maybe 75 guys on a Zoom call. If someone unmutes and starts speaking and they go all electronic, it ruins the experience for the other people, right? So you've got, like, say, a lot of you who are listening to this may have an online business. If you pre-frame the relationships you have with clients so that they're showing up for your calls in the best place. Actually, we literally just before this call had this conversation, and people let people know before the call, can we agree that you're going to be in a space, you've got a pen and pad, and you're ready to take the call and you're present. So someone doesn't take a sales call whilst they're stuck in traffic or they're driving, and then you're like, well, I've just made it, like I've just literally arranged childcare, I've done so much to get to this call, now I'm on this call and you're not present. It's so frustrating, isn't it? So you can create agreements with people that if they're going to have calls with you, that they're ready to take these calls.
Absolutely. And here's an exercise to do. So just think about one of your situations. Maybe it's like a client situation. So let's think about your clients. Just make an ultra long list of all the great things that your clients do. So when you have a great client, they do this, and they do that, and they do this. What do your great clients consistently do? Well, our great clients, they always turn up to meetings punctually, right? Our great clients always listen to us, although they may challenge us. They do, they see us as the experts, right? And they listen to what we're going to say, right? All our great clients pay us on time.
I think we should slow down on that one. I think that's a really big one.
Really, really, really big one. This is a huge one for so many businesses, right? Where we sometimes, out of the goodness of our hearts, right? The business doesn't care about that, by the way, is that we can let clients off for late payments, right? But that only affects our cash flow. So, and why should that be?
Do you know what, Pete? I think it actually not even from a place of our own problems. It's service. It's like I remember getting called out for not paying on time for a retreat I was going on, and the conversation was like, "Listen, you agreed to pay on this date, this amount, and my concern for you, Ben, is where is this showing up in the rest of your life? Where are you making promises that you're not keeping?" So I just felt that late payment when it was being asked for, I was making it from a place that I was being served by making that. Does that make sense? So because I've been called out saying, hey, listen, you agreed with me that you'd pay on this date and you haven't, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, literally I was, trying to move mountains to try and get the payment. But the way I felt when that payment was asked for was like, hey, we agreed this. You've broken that agreement, and now I'm angry and pissed off. And I understood why, because we'd made that verbal agreement, and I was held to that. And I grew so much from that experience because there was an agreement in place as well. And that was really helpful. There was no expectation I was going to pay on that date. There was a sound agreement. Ben, the final payment for the retreat needs to be on this date. Are you good for that? And I was like, yep, 100%. And when I got called to that, and people don't do that, they think that when they're doing someone a service by letting them out of agreements, oh, I don't know, I'll let it slide. But you're letting people drop their standards. And this is largely about what we talk about in the Awakened Man, is keep holding yourself to the absolute highest standard, and agreements help and facilitate that.
Absolutely. That's a really great one. You as a business owner don't want to be taking on other people's cash flow problems. And this is a strong, strong agreement. So list out all the great traits of your best clients, and then go the opposite way and think about the things that you don't like about maybe some of your existing clients and past clients. And are there agreements there that you can create that when a new client comes on board, it's like, hey, these are the 10 agreements that we have for you to be working with us. That is fucking powerful. Or even before they become a client, you're walking them around your premises, or you're showing them your office, whatever, and you've got the agreements there on the wall, right? And typically when we work with clients, these are the agreements that we go through. That comes from a powerful stance doing something like that.
Yeah, even you said there, actually, these are micro behaviors that show up as well. We've got one, and it was, I agree that I will be actively engaged in the program and not passive. A passive stance will only keep me stuck and where I am, because there's a firm, if you've got a coaching program or you've got staff, there's active and passive staff. Almost what's the problem called? It's called presenteeism. It's just they're there in person but not in spirit. where they're in the session but not into the session. And there's a difference between the results that these two kinds of people get, whether on your coaching program, whether they're in your staff, whether they're in your relationship. You've got your partner, where they're in the relationship but they're not into the relationship. It's a really, really good distinction, in versus into. And we put that in our agreements. Like, I agree that when I am an active participant in the Awakened Man, I will get the results that I wanted when I joined. If I am passive, I'm only going to keep perpetuating the same kind of results. And they're agreeing to that, and they see that. And actually, just since the men who have seen that, have read that, the participation in our program is literally 10x over the last week. Have you noticed that, Pete?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And actually, this was like another one we wanted to talk about, because when you're running groups and teams, sometimes you've got to create the culture. You've got to actively create the culture, because if you don't actively create a culture, it'll create itself anyway. Now, this is something that I saw in a lot of gyms where we had two gyms in our local town, my gym and another gym. And I would go into that gym and they hadn't done the culture work and created the agreements about how the clients would show up and how they would treat other members. And so it kind of just happened itself, and it wasn't good. It was elitist, it was judgmental, and you could feel it. I came to my gym and you would feel that kind of real tribe mentality, because we used to tell the clients, we used to say, listen, if you come into our gym, you're agreeing to behave in this way to other people. And this is something you actually have to forge. And this is done with powerful, clear, communicated agreements.
Absolutely. It's so freaking powerful. Like, I recall back to when we had like contractor meetings. So we used to interview contractors to come in if they wanted to kind of work with us. We wanted to work with them. We'd go through like an interview process, and we'd go through our values as a company. And this is who we are, and this is what we believe in, and are you aligned with that? And often there'll be contractors that wouldn't be aligned with it, but we talk about like what we expect. Again, the word expect, right? But even then, I was using that word expect, like, this is what we expect. And actually, the stronger word is, we need to agree to these things if you want to be working with our clients, and we feel good about promoting you as a business. It's really, really important, because if you don't get things in place like that, there will be slip ups, there will be fuck ups, whether that's a week down the line or a year down the line, when these things haven't been met.
Yeah, I can look. I'm just thinking about a project I had in my old business where there was no agreement in place on a scheme of works for the building, and that overran. And an agreement is sometimes who does what by when, really in black and white. And when I ended up going to court because of some of the problems. And one of my best friends is a quantitative surveyor, and he said, "Where's your agreements?" And I was like, "I didn't have any." And he was like, "You idiot." It's just like, he said, that's a real problem, because you're saying that the building taking so long cost you money, but you've got no proof that there was an agreed date. And I was like, wow. So these not just about the quality of the relationships, these are about when things go wrong as well. You've got something. And I think what Pete said earlier, there's a real distinction between these legal agreements where there's like hundreds and hundreds of things you sign away, but then there's like these clear, like, am I clear about the agreement that I have with this relationship I'm having? What are our clear agreements? And it's a really, really powerful shift you can make when you move from expecting everything in your life to sitting down and creating agreements. So I think what might be helpful today is to share in some of the agreements that we've created, both in the business and personally as well. Because we did a session on Tuesday and Wednesday. Like, one of them was about what the agreements that people want in their businesses. And then the second one was, what agreements do you need to make to achieve your goals and dreams that you've got in place as well? So the first one was that we set out 10 really clear agreements that we walked through with the men on the program, and was like, okay, and can we have an I agree to all of this? And just some of them was like, we've got one here. I agree to give feedback to the Awakened Man team from a place of service. I acknowledge that they cannot read my mind. If I have anything I feel would benefit the service, I would share it immediately and not wait. Now think about that. If you're going into an agreement with someone and that they're like, listen, if there's any what I call piss off ability factors, if there's anything that pisses you off about our relationship, can you just share it with me before like the end of your the program? And you go, oh yeah, by the way, I've been feeling resentful for months because you've done this. And I find that so often people don't share feedback and they sit on things which would really serve us. And when they do that, our business changes exponentially. So put it in the agreement.
Absolutely. Prime example of this, actually. Last week, there was a chap talking to me about his service. His service sounded interesting to me. And one of my clients had actually used this guy's service before. So I spoke to my client and he said, Pete, I'd give it literally 1 out of 5. I had a really, really bad experience. And I said, did you tell them that you had a bad experience? And did you give them feedback? And he said, no, I hadn't, but now you've raised it, I think I probably should. And I got back to this guy who was talking to me, and I said, hey, listen, just want to be completely honest with you. Like, I'm not just going to flake off and give you some bullshit excuse. I've had some feedback from one of my clients. He didn't enjoy the service. But he will be contacting you so you can get some feedback from that. But you see, like, if that person who was trying to sell to me had maybe had that agreement, that sort of agreement with my now client, maybe he'd have got that feedback early and maybe been able to rectify that relationship and change the way that person's now talking about that service, because I now didn't go and buy that service because my client said, 1 out of 5, bad experience, bad feedback.
Yeah, this is like, I think that actually Tony Shea talked about this in Delivering
My
Happiness.
favourite book, Delivering Happiness.
I was going to say it's Pete's favorite. This is Pete's hero.
It is actually my hero. Rest in peace.
I know that that's recent as well, like 2 years ago.
Really, really recent. I was absolutely gutted because I was like, I really want to meet this guy. I really like it. Was absolutely like, I'm going to make this my mission to go meet this guy.
Yeah. So just to kind of to share why me and Pete get excited about this guy. Tony Shea was the CEO of Zappos. Zappos literally built their business through customer service. Wowing clients, literally doing crazy things to wow clients, stories of them. And they had a culture fit book. And what they would do is they would match their employees with their culture. They would have a vendor agreement when people were working with them. They were like top form for the vendors, and they would only work with the best vendors. So their service was just exceptional. And this was every area of the business. You could see there was these agreements everywhere. Like, this is how we work. This is how we want you to work. And it was really, it's actually, if you go and read the book Delivering Happiness, it is probably the best book you can read about running a business based on quality and service. I think the backbone of that business was really good agreements on how people should show up.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually built some of our core values off the back of like reading that. That got, for me, that was like every new team member that came in to our company, like I would have like a string of books for them to go and read. But this was the first one. It'd be like, right, guys, I need you to read this book over the next week. Use work time, like read it in your work time, and then I want to hear some feedback, like what you thought of it, what you took away from that, because it was so pivotal in the way we built our company culture.
Yeah, people just don't do that, do they? That is amazing. You don't get many Pete Taylors in organizations, bro. That give you work time to read books. But honestly, how someone shows up after they see that level of service and they agree to that level of service for clients is unreal. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the really good exercises we did as a group yesterday was, what are your goals this year? Like, so if you're actually listening to this podcast, one of the things, if you have got a 90-day goal and you like an impossible goal, I definitely get in touch with us, because that's literally our jam. We help men create a 90-day goal. That's literally what we do. Create incredible results, stuff like that. But we wrote down what like clearly what you're trying to achieve in 90 days. And the guys were writing it down. And then we asked them the question, what agreements do you have to have with yourself in order to achieve those things? Now, this could be switch off times. This can be like, one of the things that the guys are often trying to create is a better relationship with their kids or their spouse. So if you're trying to create a better relationship with your spouse, is she in your calendar or is he in your calendar? You can't passively create these things. So they were creating agreements. They were creating agreements around how they need to show up in order to achieve and create these things in their life. Listen in. We want to be really transparent and share with you one of our impossible goals this year. We want this podcast to be the #1 self-development podcast out there. And guess what? You could really help us. If you're enjoying this conversation we're having and can think of one person, just one person, who may benefit or find this conversation beneficial, hit the share button. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or any of the podcast distributors, and send it over to them right now. We'd love to have more people just like you benefit from listening to these kind of conversations, as this is what we're really passionate about sharing. Thank you so much for listening. Go hit that share button. So a little bit of communication there from Pete.
Yeah, I just thought of it. I was like, because we're trying to grow this podcast, and I can see our listeners are going up every single week. It's brilliant to see.
Yeah.
And like, what do we need to do to rank even higher? So I'm starting to sort of like look into that. And part of it is, it's like just the more downloads we get, and the more people that leave us a review, please leave us a review if you haven't already, because it helps us. If you love the podcast, that is, because it absolutely helps us.
Can you agree that if you don't love the podcast, give us some feedback? Tell us what you don't like, because honestly, that's just as helpful. It's true, isn't it? It's true. It's so funny. It's like we service, like Feedback is a gift, and like we struggle with giving it sometimes. The interesting one that we haven't covered is looking at like your relationship, and this is a really, really powerful one. Is that I believe that so many relationship issues with your spouse can be cleared by getting clear on what it's in. Oh, by the way, we're going to be interviewing Robert Glover. Pete secured that. So make sure you tune into future podcasts. For those of you who don't know who Robert Glover is, leader of the modern men's movement. He wrote the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. But in that book, they talk about covert contracts. Right, this is where you have a thing that where you go and do something and expecting to get love, sex, praise, and nice guys have covert contracts where they go and do a load of things for people please, expecting to get something in return, and they don't. It makes them angry. And I really believe, like, as my communication improves with Poppy in our relationship, that when we create clear, this is what we're agreeing. Okay, this is when, like, if I sit down with her once a week, we get really clear on what our calendars and stuff are. That is when we're at our best. When there is expectations, like she's got a standard that she thinks I should be behaving at, and I'm not. That's when she gets angry and pissed off. I don't know about you. What's your experience of this, Pete?
The same. Absolutely the same.
Lost you for a second there, bro.
Last night, the classic. Pete, did you put the washing on the line? I was like, no, what washing? She's like, oh, I put some washing on this morning. I thought you saw me put it on, and I thought things fall down, right? Communication falls down. Agreements.
Hey guys, it's Ben here. We've had a little bit of a technical issue this afternoon where Pete has paused and I've paused, but at the same time, we want to just share with you, we really hope you enjoy today's podcast on expectations versus agreements. And what we'll do is we'll actually put the excerpt from agreements versus expectations into the podcast notes. If you want it, like, head on to the show notes, because we're going to put some goodies in there so you can really just go a little bit deeper on expectations versus agreements. And honestly, they are so influential. Just seeing the change in our culture this week in a group of men, being clear in these in our relationships, is super powerful as well. And the reason we shared this with you today is because we believe you doing the same, just going to shifting from a place where there's these covert contracts where I'm not communicating clearly what I want, and what you're not communicating clearly what you want, and we're agreeing a time or a date that something's done, or if it's done. Honestly, the relationship strength just absolutely shifts in a matter of literally on a dime. So please, honestly, take action what you've heard today. It's really, really helpful, and we will see you on the next Awaken Man podcast. Cheers for listening.